Welcome back to the Jaywalking Podcast. I'm your host, is Jay. We're telling one story at a time while taking one step at a time. How everyone's doing today. Today's episode is all about self-care. Now, I know I touched upon this previously, a little bit in other episodes like previous ones, but today is all about self-care and how self-care is not selfish. It's a matter of surviving things around us. And what I mean by that is just how we navigate our own world and how we navigate, you know, our life currently is through self-care because most of us don't do that, or there's little self-care that we do for ourselves, and different purposes and different meaning of the word and phrase self-care. We're going to get all into that in this episode. So what I mean by, just self-care, it goes just beyond like, certain aesthetics. It goes beyond certain meanings, and it goes beyond even things that we do for ourselves. And what I mean by that is just self-care is such an important thing, not just for a black nerd like myself, but just for anyone in any sort of, realm of like, hobby or interest that you have, or even work. We all need a little bit of self-care. And I want to challenge you, the listeners and you're watching now, just to practice self-care, and not your typical self-care, that you usually do for yourself, because many of us, when we think of self-care, is, different definitions for it. I know for me, self care is all about disconnecting and disconnecting from the world around me, and just disconnecting from the issues or things that's coming up for me, you know, around that time. But I never thought self care was, being engaged into something. I never thought self care was actually doing something for myself, or doing, being active or doing something versus just disconnecting. Because for the longest time, my self care was a form of disconnected from everyone around me, whether it's through anime, video games, or just scrolling on my, daily device, and just disconnecting from my current issues, or just disconnecting just to give myself a breather. And that was my form of self-care. However, in my life, I've learned that, self-care can be more than just disconnecting from the world around me. And I'll be challenging myself too from time to time to go outside of the box of my version of self-care and try something different. So I just want to give a story of a time where I felt burnt out, and then the moment when I had like a shift to, instead of just disconnecting as a self-care coping mechanism, it turned into actually doing something. So the story follows, just, I'm in college and I'm dealing with so much, grief, that I mentioned in the previous episode, in episode 10, when it came to just talking about my grief and just dealing with the fact like, hey, you're dealing with all these losses. The way I was dealing with them, I was just disconnecting from everyone. And at that time, I was just using anime and video games. But I also want to mention I was incorporating a lot of eating. And I was just eating different, not so healthy foods like, Burger King, maybe Chick-fil-A, maybe Dunkin' Donuts, maybe McDonald's, because that was around the corner around that time where I used to live. So I was just consuming a lot of like, food that wasn't healthy for me. But on top of that, I was consuming a lot of sweets and a lot of desserts because I have a sweet tooth. So I definitely was, indulging myself into those activities where I was just constantly eating and just constantly just playing video games and watching anime and just doing all these things, you know, together, just to kind of get away from all that grief, but to get away all the anger that I held within myself. Because at that time I didn't like myself, and I didn't like the image that I was portrayed or just shown in other people's lives. And my body image was not the greatest either, because I was gaining a lot of weight from consuming all sorts of different products and food at that time, and it wasn't a good look for me. And but I was blaming other people for, how I looked and how I was taking care of myself, because I was like, you keep doing this to me, I'm responding this way, but why you're not caring for that? Why you don't, view this as like your fault? And I didn't view that as like, okay, I play a part in this too, of like, oh, I'm doing this to myself and I'm, not taking care of myself. But I believed at that time, like my self care and me taking care of myself, quote unquote, was disconnecting from the issues that was surrounding myself. And I was just overeating, watching anime, and playing video games consistently daily. Like I remember times where I would literally eat the snacks that I had, early in the day. Then later on in the afternoon, I went to the corner store, or at that time, just to buy more snacks along with the food I had, to then watch, a couple animes or different TV shows at that time, just to say that I was doing some self care, but I was destroying myself. And I'm continuing with this story because I remember one in particular where I asked this person out, just to hang out and just see what happens. But I was rejected because I wasn't their type in that particular time. And I really let myself go when, I was dealing with all that stuff. And I was just so angry, at this person. And it turned into just, again, stress from being rejected, but also going to school and just kind of dealing with classes. I was like, I'm gonna just take care of myself. And I said self-care was literally consumed of it literally led to me just like eating a bunch of different sweets and different foods while also just, playing a video game throughout that weekend. And I just gained like around like three, like I gained enough pounds where I was like 325 pounds. And it was not a good look because I didn't really have a muscle mass, or I didn't have like any sort of muscle. Like I did have some sort of muscle in my aesthetic, but it wasn't to the level where it's at right now, where I'm able to bench, lift, curl, and do push-ups like I can now. But back then it was just not the greatest feeling whatsoever. But what kind of shifted for me, at least, was just the fact that, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was talking to my buddy named Ray. Shout out to Ray again. I mentioned him previously in earlier episodes, but just to go back to him, I mentioned to him, I was just talking to him about like all this stuff I was dealing with and all the things that I had on my mind. And I was just like, bro, like, I don't know what to do. And he mentioned the gym a couple of times. And I heard plenty of people tell me, oh, I should go to the gym, or I should not do this or do that, because they would just give me advice. But it just didn't really set home with me, because I was like, bro, why I got to change? Why I got to do this? Why I need to, do this for myself? Why the world can't just accept me for who I am and just deal with it? And a part of me was like selfish in that manner. And I brought that selfishness to Ray. And I was like, yo, Ray, bro, like, why the world can't change for me? Why I got to change for it? Why I got to do X, Y, and Z? And he, again, I can't remember exactly what he said, but he basically was just telling me, like, dude, like, yeah, the world is not going to accept, like, certain things, but, you know, what you can do for yourself is the only thing you can control, and everything else will literally follow after that. You just got to do it for yourself first, and then the world will change around you because you're changing yourself. At first I thought it was bullshit, I'm not gonna lie, because I was like, bro, you already have, your partner, you already have your life going for you. I'm like, why I gotta do X, Y, and Z? But then I come to realize it, just kind of looking back on, like, bro, like, I was a different age gap, and this man is giving me wisdom, from where he's at in his life. And I'm just like, okay, let me take this a little bit more seriously than I need to be. And then a couple other real friends was telling me the same message. So I'm a big believer, if different people are telling you the same message, you should listen. So that's what I did. And it was difficult at first, but I started off, this shift of like, okay, maybe I'm, causing this by, saying this is self-care, but I'm more just destroying myself, but using what's happened around me as an excuse to continue the same behavior. Again, this is me looking back on it, but back then I didn't care. I was just mad at the world and mad at the fact that I have to shift and do this change. But it was whatever, and I just kept doing that same pattern. But what kind of led me to the shift again was just, all right, this is happening. I'm playing a part in it. Let me just at least walk to the gym. And I did that 2 to 3 times just so I can get the habit and pattern of like, okay, I'm walking to the gym. And it was one day out of those walks, I was like, okay, I'm gonna walk to the gym and I'm gonna just go to a machine. Whatever machine it is, just go to a machine and just work on that. And I remember it to this day. I walked in the gym and it was at my buddy's old complex at the time. I walked in there and I went to the back machine, like the one that does the lat pull down. I was like, okay, let's start off with that. And then it went from the lat pull down. And then that same, day, I went to the treadmill. I was like, okay, let's just go on the treadmill and just walk for 10 minutes because it took like 15-ish minutes to walk there. So I was like, let me just do 10 minutes and then I'll just walk back home. And eventually, as this pattern kept going of like, let me just walk to the gym and just do one thing, it turned into like, okay, let me just walk to the gym and do a set workout, whether it's arms that day, back, chest, whatever it could be, just go and do it. And I kept doing that over and over again. And I found myself being in a better spot, like mentally and physically, because over time I was losing weight and doing body recomposition because I wasn't trying to bulk or lean. It was mainly just like, let me just work out with what I have right now and just kind of reconstruct it in a way to be in a healthier version. And the self care that I was so ingrained and used to, I was doing that on the side, but then it transformed into just, okay, instead of watching anime all day or playing a video game all day while eating, why not just change up the habit of getting something healthier after you did your full workout as a reward? And I kept doing that over and over again. It got to the point where instead of being angry at the world and asking why I got to change for it turned into, okay, I'm changing myself and I'm noticing things around me change. Because as soon as I started working out, and this is before I had a wife and just like, just other, interests, like I started to notice like people start to interact with me more. New people in the gym started talking to me and ask me about, my routine and what I'm doing. And it turned into like, oh, like this person is more healthier and just like looks better, so let me talk to him now. So I was getting a bunch of like Snapchats and just Instagrams and even in person, just kind of like directly talking to me. Those who I even didn't even expect to interact with me was literally interacting with me now because I was becoming a healthier version of myself. And that all changed from just doing a different routine of self-care, because for so long I was always disconnecting from that reality that I was in and being my own world. And then it shift to like actually doing something instead of disconnecting and being present. It literally just changed my mindset of like, okay, the more present I am with this self-care instead of disconnecting, the more control and involvement I have of myself, and the change around me will then just happen. And then instantly that just kept flowing into other things like setting boundaries. I'm not gonna lie, I usually don't set boundaries because boundaries was foreign to me. I didn't have no clue what that was. I was mainly, okay, like I'm comfortable with everything that's around me due to my past. And hopefully I get into that in an episode of the podcast of how I dealt with like a certain period in time around like 2018 to like late 2021 going into 2022. That was a interesting time period for me where boundaries was not really a thing and I just kept going with the flow. Obviously there was like strong core boundaries where I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. But most of the time it was just like, flexible, and I was just like doing whatever, you know, at that time. But that led into like also setting boundaries for, this form of self-care of being in the moment and being present. That's when I was able to learn of the power of the word no. And hopefully, I'll talk more about like the power of no in a future episode. But if not, we can go a little bit into it right now where the word no, for me was foreign. I didn't like it because I felt like I would, hurt other people or break off certain relationships if I said the word no. And growing up, the word no, like in my household, it was a great word to use, but not with certain things, as far as like, chores or just like doing things, off like to the side or be like, hey mom, like I can wait for this. Like it didn't work that way. But majority of the time, like when I said the word no, it was so uncomfortable to say that, whether it was like family, friends, or in certain relationships that I have, it was not the greatest thing for me. And I try to stay away from that. But as I had this shift in mindset, I was literally like, you know what? I can say the word no. I can set these boundaries and be able to just not deal with certain things in my life. And it was such a great feeling to do that. And I just kept continuing to do more boundaries, that was, in this current reality, but also like in the present moment. I was able to say the word no. I was able to distance myself when things just didn't feel right for me. Cause usually I'll like stick around, even though something doesn't feel right for me. I'm like, okay, I'm comfortable enough. But in reality, I wasn't. I was able to do that. And I was able to like set certain boundaries in relationships, not just friendships, but also intimate partners and relationships. Cause I was like, these are my boundaries. And if you cross these boundaries, like then I don't want to be around you, because if you're not able to respect my boundaries that I'm telling you right now, there's no point of like doing this sort of thing or relationship where I need to be around. And it just kept going on and on with like certain boundaries I have now where I was able to just set for myself for the first time in so long. And they were a great thing. And then sometimes when I felt overwhelmed, at a certain point in time, it led into just me, having like simple, resets for myself. So I always love poetry and love journaling, like, my thoughts and feelings at that time, and still do to this day, because poetry for me is such a great outlet to just allow myself to have that expression. And it gives me a little bit of that old satisfaction of disconnecting, but I'm staying present in the moment because I'm in tune with my own emotions and the thoughts that I'm having at that time. Another one is like, walking. Granted, I'm not a big walker, but I'll just take a step outside and just kind of take a couple steps, in the grass, and just a couple steps like away from the vicinity. And it's such a great feeling to kind of remind myself like this is life. This is something that I'm supposed to be enjoying instead of stressing out all the time. And another thing that I use to kind of like a small reset is the gym now, because that mindset and the shift that I had, from self-caring to eating and overeating and just looking at video games all day and just kind of like going about like, okay, looking on YouTube about this video game, looking at, certain things about this video game, applying in that video game, to now like, okay, looking up workout videos and getting certain aspects from other people, using my own workouts to kind of blend in to be more in the present moment, and being not only physically better but mentally better. And I just love that I had that mindset like shift, because it made things so much easier for myself. But yeah, that was literally my journey when it came to like self-care and the meaning of it, because now I'm learning, being disconnect, it's not a bad thing. It protected me and it felt safe to be away from the current reality I'm in, to be in my own world. But now I'm in a place where I can disconnect if I choose to, but I always have different self-care methods and skills that can keep me in the present moment and also be a better version of myself. So, if you don't take anything away from this episode, the one thing I always want to stress and tell people is you don't have to earn rest. You deserve it because you exist, and you deserve it because self-care is the best care for not only yourself but the people around you. So I encourage you, and I encourage you to tell other people too to take care of themselves, and also challenge them of their usual self-care routine. Do something different, because if you're like me and you always disconnect to have some self-care, try to be in the present moment and do something that has to be active and be in the doing instead of just disconnecting. So I challenge you to that as well, because again, you don't have to earn rest. You deserve it because you exist and you're a lovely human being. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Jaywalking Podcast, where we're telling one story at a time and we're taking one step at a time. Appreciate you guys. See ya. And again, we have merch. And if you're interested in looking at the merch, DM me or put a comment down in the video, or the Spotify, episode that you're listening on. Please let me know. Until then, continue to walk, guys. Take care.